Hi, Governor. My name is Sydney. I'm calling from Vermont. I'm trying to wrap my head around this recent story about a 6-year-old boy in Virginia who shot his teacher. You know, it goes without saying that we obviously have a problem with easy access to firearms in this country. And I'm wondering, is there legislation that holds the parents of the 6-year-old boy liable for not having their firearms safely locked up within the home? Can these parents be criminally charged for, the actions that the 6-year-old took? And also, is there plans to make the red flag laws that were passed in Congress, more easy for local police, parents, and school counselors to understand how that system can work? How do we make those laws and legislation and turn them into real action and change? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sydney. And you're right, it's almost incredible. 6-year-old brings a gun to school and then shoots the teacher, 25-year-old, who was trying to take the gun away from the child. I mean, it's so bizarre on so many levels. How do you get to a point where a 6-year-old has access to a gun or is familiar enough with a gun to actually put it in his backpack and bring it to school? And you wonder, is this the socialization that children are now exposed to these gun shootings, and they're having drills in school for just, God forbid, there's a shooter in the school? But it's almost unimaginable, right, on that level, just that a 6-year-old would bring a gun to school. And then the how starts to bring you down the path to the insanity of our current position, right? When we look back one day, 20, 30 years from now, how America allowed guns to be this prevalent and do this much damage to society is going to be one of the real questions, because it is a great, great failure of government. And it starts with the federal government, because a state cannot handle this. New York State passed the most aggressive gun safety law in the nation. And I'm very proud of it. And by the way, people still hunt and they have guns, and there's been no slippery slope. But New York can have as many laws as it wants on guns. The guns still come over the border. That's why it has to be federal action. The federal government, I believe, they just passed a law a few months back, which I don't think does a heck of a lot, but at least they passed the law. It's emblematic in some ways of the federal government being responsive to the extremes. 70% of the American people, Democrats and Republicans, support common sense gun reform. The far right, however, is adamantly against it. And it's not just the NRA, it's the far right uber conservatives. They see it as a constitutional issue. They believe if there's any law on guns, there'll be an additional law, and that's the so-called slippery slope argument. And the federal government is responsive to the extremes. On guns, they're responsive to the far right. Other issues, they're responsive to the far left. And I've always said you have a far right and you have a far left. But guns, it's about the far right. And it is absurd. Handguns are the number one gun used in criminal activity. There are red flag laws, as you mentioned. New York passed some of the first red flag laws, but they are difficult to implement because there is a legitimate balance. What a red flag law is saying is, if you exhibit behavior that a school teacher or person in a supervisory capacity believes, suggests that you are not competent, you are not capable of handling a firearm or being exposed to a place where a firearm is accessible, then they can step in as a matter of mental health and bring in mental health professionals, et cetera. That is a cumbersome procedure. You are making a determination that would infringe an individual's rights, so you can understand why there would be a cumbersome procedure, but those laws are in place, and you're right, they are hard to enforce. But in the more extreme cases where it's obvious, it can be very helpful. If it's obvious that a person is distraught or mentally ill, or has in a domestic situation where they have a restraining order against them. In those situations, it has been very helpful. But certainly, the red flag laws in and of themselves are not the solution to this problem. On your specific question, a parent could be held theoretically criminally negligent if they allow the 6-year-old access to the gun, but it would have to be at a level of negligence that is determined to be gross. It's more a question that we deal with all the time. When you have a gun in the home, that gun is most likely to do damage to someone in the home. And gun storage and gun safety is a very big issue. And people will say, well, you know, I have a gun in the house, but I'm a responsible owner. Yeah, it's a fine line between having a gun in the home that is accessible to you in a position where if you need to protect yourself or protect your home, it's accessible to you quickly, but it's not accessible to children in the home. That is it's a very fine line between those two. Protecting the children, they can't access the gun, but you can on an emergency basis. So it's easier said than done. But it's an issue that we've talked about frequently, which is if you own a gun storage, gun safety in the home. But on the overall point, a 6-year-old brings a gun to school. Boy, oh boy, it would be unimaginable, except in today's society.